Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Firefighters Podcast, where we seek to develop, inspire, and motivate the world of the emergency services operator through a series of wide-ranging conversations. Now, before we go any further, just hit that rate, follow, or subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to. It's a key performance indicator for us and helps us reach even more people. Now, here's what we've got for you today. Today I'm joined by Goulden, a former police officer who served for 30 years in Scotland and has since become one of the leading voices on violence, prevention, organisational culture and active bystandership. Since leaving policing, Graham has worked across the UK, the US and Canada, helping high-risk professions like police and fire better understand how harm develops and, more importantly, how it can be stopped early. His work focuses on peer intervention, giving people the tools and confidence to step in before issues escalate into misconduct, mistakes, or something far more serious. And that's exactly what this conversation is about today, because across our sector right now, there's increasing scrutiny on culture. Reports highlighting bullying, sexism, racism, and real reluctance from people to challenge poor behaviour. At the same time, we're seeing the ongoing impact of poor mental health, with suicide becoming tragically common in our profession. What Graham brings is a different approach. Not more policy, not more punishment, but a focus on people. We talk about how human beings are the biggest influences we have on each other, why harmful behaviour often starts long before we recognise it, and how small actions early can prevent much bigger problems later. We get into what real loyalty actually looks like in our jobs, why staying silent isn't neutral, it's being part of the problem, and how stepping in isn't about getting someone in trouble, it's about having their back. Because in the end, it only takes one person to act, one conversation, one moment, and one piece of courage to change the direction of something. This is a powerful one. And for context, it was actually recorded in August of 2025. We are just so behind on some elements of the podcast with some incredible guests coming out. But this one was so valuable, even despite the passage of time, I wanted to get out there. It's honest, it's practical, and directly relevant to anyone working in the emergency services today. I'll see you on the other side. I was reading through some of our stuff this morning, and it sort of echoes off the back of our chat before we started recording today, is you think of people as influencers. Now, I don't mean this in a social media context, but we are all influencers.
Yeah.
I always think, are you going to be the reason someone doesn't want to come to work today? Are you going to be the reason someone does or doesn't want to come to the party? And that's not about being totally solely focused on yourself, but we leave fingerprints, don't we? We leave traces, to reference a previous guest. We leave little marks on people as we go. When did you start thinking about that more consciously, about the influence and the impact that you're having on the people around you?
I suppose, for me, my first sort of input into this type of work was when I was with, in my last years of policing, I was with the Violence Reduction Unit. And it was then that I started to become more aware of my ability to change friends, to change family members, to change colleagues, but only if they wanted to. I couldn't force them to see my viewpoint, but I had the power, the influence to make change. And a big part of my work in violence prevention was to try and change society attitudes to how we prevent violence. Most people think violence is about locking people up, but what I was learning, that isn't the best way. It will never work. So we need to start thinking about engaging community better in these approaches. And the first step is to really help them understand that that violence is totally preventable, and they have a role in doing that. So you're spot on there with that ability to influence. Human beings are the biggest influence on other human beings. We often think it's our own personal attitudes that impact our behaviour, but it's people around us.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
There's two threads that I want to pull from that. One is always that concept, and it's a bit of a harsh one, especially when you think of your workplace. I mean, you can do it in your social structure. I was going to say that, if you can't change the people you're around, change the people you're around is something that was commonly told to me many years ago during my sort of addiction and recovery. I went through a period of addiction when I was very young. And ultimately at that point, I had to change the people I was around because there was too many triggers in the environment and stuff like this. Yeah. But in the workplace, it's much more difficult. Yeah. And like you've just alluded to, the whole you can take a horse to water, you can't make them drink. So people have to want to engage in that change. Which, when you're working with members of the public, what is that? How did this unit? So people that are unfamiliar with it, how did the unit come about? So what? Because everybody would assume violence prevention is everything the police do.
Yeah, 2004. Scotland was full of lovely castles and lovely scenery, but we were one of the most violent countries in Europe. Glasgow, I think, had the badge of shame as being the most violent capital city.
Jesus.
And yeah, it's amazing when you think about that. And
it's a beautiful city, but
it's a beautiful city.
Dark areas, I'll bet.
But we started to really, understand what was going on, and we started to look behind the behaviours and started to find a very chaotic, a very traumatised country. We still have issues. Look at our drug deaths in Scotland, still a major, major issue, and that's connected to looking at violence. And basically, Scotland just wanted to look at things differently, to think differently, because we traditionally tend to look at violence through the lens of enforcement. Lock people up, stop and search. You know what? That's important. It's so important that we contain and manage levels of violence. But at the same time, we need to be asking questions, what is contributing to these behaviours? Why is it happening in the first place? These are difficult, uncomfortable conversations. So the backdrop to the violence reduction unit was high levels of violence. Violence is a tool to get results. Lots of domestic abuse in Scotland, and you had some gang issues in Glasgow. And when you looked at the backstory to lots of the young men, because it's predominantly young men who are getting involved in violence, it was chaos in their lives. There was trauma in their childhood, escaping domestic abuse. And the gang became the family, I suppose. So we wanted to start to look at different ways to, deal with offending. You need to do the public deserve that accountability. But at the same time, how do we start to, interrupt? And we'll talk a lot about interruption today. How can we interrupt? How can we give somebody another chance, another opportunity to get a route in their lives?
It is that pattern interrupt, isn't it? There's a lot of triggers here from Tony Robbins stuff that I used to go through, and we talk about pattern interruption. I know for some people, Tony Robbins is for anyone that doesn't know, what is Tony Robbins? Is he a cringy American self-help person? Is that cringy sounds horrible, but that's how the UK would probably describe him.
I think,
he'd probably describe himself as a performance coach.
Yeah, and he's good points. I've heard some of his stuff in the past, but here in the UK, we don't like that person who's so.
It's very rah.
Yeah. But there's a message there if you choose to find it.
Violence in just if we think of like anthropomorphically, like human development and violence, I don't know that we can get rid of it. And I wonder if it's a socioeconomic thing as well, because it's always been part of our makeup, hasn't it? In the very early human days, we're competing for food, for mate, for territory. There's a lot that was blunt force trauma stuff. And then we moved through into like hunter-gatherer stuff, but then we started engaging in territorial stuff, agricultural revolution. We were still having issues over land and disputes and resources. Religion, with respect, has had needs to pick up a big bucket of responsibility from some of this. Religion is, I'm not personally religious. It has many, many incredible effects that it has on the world. But some would argue there's also a big argument. In the 21st century now, what role do you think violence still plays in society, and why is it so prolific?
I learned many things in my policing career, but it was one about the power of relationships. And I think violence is a breakdown in relationships, right? Violence, we've always had violence. Will we ever eradicate violence totally? Probably not. But can we make it better? Yeah, we can make it better. But can we make it worse as well? We can make it worse by doing nothing or doing the same old thing. And, Scotland very quickly and Glasgow very quickly lost that badge of shame because of the way that we tackled it. We started to look at the early years as the best time to prevent violence. We started to look at, some of these contributing factors. You mentioned religion, but you could look at poverty. You could look at notions of masculinity. You could look at social media. One thing I started
social media has got a lot to answer for. It's a whole new arena for violence, isn't it?
It is, but if you just mention the term social media, you remove the person behind the messaging. And we need to. One thing I did with my time in the VRU was to look at that word violence differently. How do we redefine the V? Violence. And for me, violence is everything from, words, jokes, and language to suicide and everything in between. It's all there. And we need to start thinking about how we as a society, put more focus on the stuff that society sees as the small stuff, the words, the language, the online abuse, because that's where, violence starts. It's on this continuum of harm that keeps going until we interrupt it. Silence is like an infection that keeps harm and violence going. And look at what's happening in the UK just now. We're on the brink of who knows what's coming down the road in the next few weeks, months, wherever, where we've got people just throwing grenades in the room with no real thought where this is going to end up. And you saw it last year in England and Wales, where we had riots in the streets. You know, and there's people involved in these riots who would never normally get involved in this stuff. But they were just provoked.
Take me to the element of socioeconomic levels. You know, so in your policing, I would imagine, and I'm going to do a big plastered accusation here, members of lower socioeconomic levels probably more involved in crime.
Yeah.
Low level and violent crime. I imagine the higher levels are financial crime and things of that nature. The violence that the police probably deals with on a day-to-day basis. Someone said to me ages ago, and it did relate to the podcast, they were like, the limits of your language are the limits of your world. If you struggle to communicate with people, your ability to build rapport and find nuances, find out that you're more alike than you are different, I think that probably has a massive element to it. So is there an educational factor to this as well?
Yeah. Someone also said to me once, if you need to look beyond the dinner table for a role model, you're already at a disadvantage. I thought it's very powerful. I know, that's very powerful.
Great one.
I know, and the young man at the time who said that came from that type of background. And it made me think about my first 20 years in policing, how I was always kicking doors in, arresting people, and not thinking about the contributing factors. What was going on. And I think, you're so right to bring in the social inequalities that we have in society. We cannot ignore them. We just can't, and we tend to, many people want to ignore these contributing factors.
Well, because they're perennial problems, though, aren't they? We haven't really got an answer for them.
No, you're right.
That's, I think, what makes it more difficult for people to even try and wrestle with those kind of problems.
Yeah, and we have people from different communities who just lack hope. Just imagine waking up every day and thinking, "What's the point? What's the point?" And first of all, that doesn't excuse bad behavior. It doesn't excuse violence or whatever. That still needs to be dealt with. But these are the contributing factors: the what and the why. We're very good at asking the who's responsible, who's done it question. Society, but we're terrible at asking the what and the why question. And to solve any issue, you need to be asking the difficult conversations. And
William Wood watches are back supporting the podcast, and honestly, it means a lot to me because this brand is built on real service heritage. William Wood was the name of the founder's grandfather. He served 25 years in the British Fire Service at Pilgrim Street in Newcastle and Gateshead Fire Brigade on Blue Watch. He earned commendations for bravery and leaving a lasting legacy that really still drives the brand today. Whether it's the melting down of the original 1920s British brass firefight helmets, and they're building them into the actual case backs. And they also use upcycled fire hose on all of their straps. It's not just design, it's about the job, and it's built into every single component. I've been wearing them for 10 years now. Found them back in 2015 actually, and they've genuinely been a part of my daily kit ever since. I've got two. I've got the Valiant and I've got the Chivalrous as well in Midnight Blue. But the thing about the brand, about William Wood watches, it stands so different because of its story. Take, for example, their Dunkirk watch. That's not just a timepiece. It's actually built to honour the Massey Shore fireboat. And that vessel actually helped save over 600 troops during the Dunkirk evacuation in World War II. And if you own one of the Dunkirk watches, right, your name is engraved onto the plaque on the Massey Shore itself. So you're not just wearing history, you're actually becoming part of it yourself. I'll be honest though, the one I've got my eye on this year is the Fearless watch. It's more of like a field watch on the station, on the watch. It's a smaller 39mm case, compact, rugged, just feels right for the job. If you're under about quality, you get a full 3-year warranty, and they've got service centres in the UK, North America, Asia, and it's Great Britain's #1 watch manufacturer on Trustpilot. And it's not just me who rates it. Here's a few words from the powerhouse actor Russell Crowe. No, this is not AI. This is actually Russell Crowe's words. And you can even see it on their website. There's a video of him.
His grandson, Johnny Garrett, decided to make some watches, and one of his concepts was to use decommissioned firefighting equipment. So he's used the brass from British firefighting helmets, some of them like 100 years old, to build his watch cases. And he's used decommissioned fire hose for his straps. Right? This is the Triumph Jubilee. A bit of fun thing on the back. It says, in case of fire, break glass. But it's a handsome watch and it fits really well on the wrist. It wears beautifully.
So Russell loves it, and I know you're going to love it too. You can actually get 10% off a William Wood watch by using code FFPodcast. If you want to be part of the history and you want to wear it on your wrist, jump in the notes, check out William Wood watches. Go and get yourself that clean design, proper craftsmanship, and something that actually means something when you're wearing it. Let's get back to the show.
Over 8.
Otherwise, you're just treating symptoms, aren't you?
Yeah.
It's like when doctors or anybody, we just treat symptoms. We don't treat the cause.
Yeah.
Cause can take a long time though, and that probably segues me into things like cultural change and cultural work, whether it be in organizations or in communities.
Yeah.
That takes a long time because you're really trying to get past the fifth why into the cause of it.
Yeah, but then if you look at people coming from these communities you talk about, there's lots of people in these communities who don't go on to commit violence. There's lots of young people who don't who are exposed to domestic abuse in their family relationships who don't go on to commit domestic abuse. Why is that? Because the protective factor is community. The protective factor is caregiving. It's that providing somebody a sense of, I often simplify it down. If your life is full of demons, you've got demons on this shoulder, even one angel on that shoulder can be enough to wipe them away because it gives you some control. It gives you some, I think it's coherence it's called. You have that ability to understand, and you do have hope because people are there to help you. And that's why it's important that, sports coaches, teachers, police officers, grandparents, uncles, they've all got that role to play in looking out for their neighbours, for their own relatives.
Well, it's the whole thing about, a village raises a child analogy, isn't it? There's a few things I want to kind of pull on there or throw on the table of this conversation. Things like scared straight, that we saw in America and how that didn't work. It wasn't an effective mechanism to put children into prisons for a short period of time. They tended to start idolizing people. And also, like you just said about the people around you doesn't necessarily automatically mean you'll end up doing that. I remember hearing a story of, twin sons of an alcoholic, and one of them became an alcoholic and ruined his life, and the other went on to be moderately middle class, successful. But the kind of 12, 15 year interviews, I think it was only after the brother was arrested, and then the other brother came in and some sort of psychologist got hold of him and asked some questions. And the narratives were the same, but completely different ends of the spectrum. One was, well, my dad was an alcoholic criminal, what'd you expect? And the other was, my dad was an alcoholic criminal and I knew I was never going to be that. Yeah. And so how, where does that fork in the road, sliding doors come from? The work that you were involved in violence reduction, what was some of the, not the low hanging fruit, because I imagine there wasn't any, but what was like some of the things that started to bear fruit?
So, for me, it was really, looking at those early years. You talked about the twins. There's so many examples of people going down different routes. And often it can be as simple as having that teacher, that sports coach, just gives that person that ability to walk away from that. So the early years is really, really important. And I think just giving people, one thing we did in Glasgow with the gangs was to just give people a route out, and put support around that person. Don't just give them a job, because the chances are they're going to go to work the next day and hit somebody. You need to help them. You need to. It's not like they don't want to work. It's just that many people can't. It's like kids going to school. It's like some kids are looking after their parents, and some parents who it's not like they don't want to parent. It's just they can't parent. So we need to help give them tools and strategies to be, to resolve the past trauma, past addiction issues that are in their life, so they can go on to become that person they truly want to be. And I think nobody, at the age of 4 and 5 says to their parent or their teacher, I want to be a murderer when they grow up. But often things happen in those early years which really, really starts to impact negatively on their ability to respond to, stress in life, because they're constantly, I think that sense of dysregulation that happens to a traumatized brain. And that's how people react. So, there's not one single solution to these issues. We used lots of things, mentoring, we used peer support, we had innovative, creative enforcement tactics. We need to contain and manage levels of violence, but at the same time, we need to start looking at a range of strategies involving so many different organizations and in particular community to help prevent things.
If we change gears and I flip that into an organizational context, total transparency, we've been having our challenges in the first responder sector and certainly in the fire service around behaviors that don't align to our stated values, whether it be the Nolan principles or our national core code of ethics, sexism, racism, homophobic behaviors. That was a lot of stuff that came out from some of the misconducts in the UK Fire and Rescue Service, the HMI CFRS allegations. You would like to assume it would be because trying to wrestle with society and trying to fix that is trying to warm up the ocean, I would imagine. But inside an organization, you would like to believe it would be much easier. And I know you've done a lot of work around this as well. Why is it something we seem to find so difficult? And I don't say we as specifically the fire service, but just organizations in general.
You're right to move on to this because you think about it. In society, the situation can often lead to people using violence. Same in the workplace. Situation. And I think culture in likes of fire and rescue, policing, high risk organizations, and you say a lot of the first responders just now. I think lots of these organizations, we place a lot of reliance on our code of ethics, code of conduct. And I'd say a lot of times every single week, police officers, firefighters, when you witness certain types of behavior, you currently have two choices, right? And I don't think they're great choices for your staff. One is to ignore it. So any human being, even if with a code of ethics, has the option to walk away and do nothing. It's a choice. And why isn't it a good choice for you personally? Because you could find yourself being investigated, misconduct, disciplined, right? And you're going against your code of ethics. That's why it's not a great choice. Choice two is to report it as per your code of ethics. You're probably thinking, why isn't that a great choice for people? Well, think about this. What types of phrases do we often hear about associated with people who do speak up? We hear that.
Stitches get stitches, Graham.
Exactly. Snitches, grasses,
whistleblowers.
Be caution saying whistleblower, but you've got troublemaker. I did a training a few weeks ago when someone used the word rat. I went, wow, where did that come from?
They're in the mafia, apparently.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the challenge. The reality is that most people in fire and rescue and policing know that some officers and staff need to go because their behaviour has crossed the line. They need to go. And also that individually you would be respected for reporting that type of behaviour. But nothing I do, nothing leaders do, we can't make that fear go away. Courage is something inside us. So that's why I don't think it's a great choice. What I do in my work is give people a third option. And for me, it's a much better option. And that is where you act before you need to report it. If you act early, you don't need to grass on your mate. You have to report a mate who breaches the code of ethics. But if you act early enough, you don't, because you've dipped it in the bud because there's nothing to report. And also when we start to look at these behaviours, there's a big issue in policing and fire and rescue with mental health and well-being. It's a massive issue. And, it doesn't excuse bad behaviour, but in some cases, stress, unpredictable, prolonged, extreme stress can lead to bad behaviour. It doesn't excuse it, but we also know that colleagues see, poor well-being issues, but don't intervene until it's crossed that line into, high levels of like suicide prevention or whatever. But if we act in these early moments, we can create that sense of community that I think fire needs, policing needs, people looking out for each other. Because this, you're busy people just now in police and fire. And I think policing's lost its sense of community, its sense of connection. Do you think a lot have lost that as well, though? There's a couple of I want to ask you about how we develop courage. I want to ask you that in a minute.
Yeah. But sense of community, when I first joined the fire and rescue service, there was a lot more social elements.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just a loser and I haven't got any friends, but I think watches don't eat out as much together. You don't have, the family barbecues. Sometimes they still don't even eat together. I used the example. I went to a drug factory, effectively, the other day, a house that was being used for the production of drugs, not for my own personal consumption, one that we'd found. And the neighbors were, surprised and appalled and everything like that. And it got me thinking again, how well do you know your neighbors? So whether that be societally or organizationally, because an organization is just a collection of individuals from the wider society who theoretically have aligned values and sort of a sense of purpose. But we've never been as connected as we are now through social media, but we've also never, loneliness is more common. People feel very alone.
Yeah. I think, and let's talk about my old profession just now. I talked about workplace stress and the pressures of work, It'd be the same for firefighters. You're busy people, right? I can remember in my day, you're right. We had we had what we call meal breaks, where we actually came together and had an hour off the front line.
I think it's harder for police officers and for paramedics. I'll say that because I have to say it. I think it's easier it's not easy. It's not easier. You've got more ability to try if you want to build team bonds, because there's usually at least 4 of you together all the time. You guys and girls, sometimes you're on your own, sometimes you're in a pair. Same with paramedics. They might be driving alone in the car, or there's 2 of them. Fire service, for better and for worse, maybe, like, we're always in teams.
I think it's something that I see in policing. I see with law stats, and we can't also forget about issues outside work. We're living at a time just now where, financial issues, all the issues that are coming at home outside work are coming into the workplace. And I just think we're living in a very chaotic society just now. Definitely. Right. And I think people are coming to work, they're bringing that stress to work, the workloads that's taking place, the pressures on fire and rescue, pressures on policing. And it's a perfect storm for people just to be keeping their heads down, getting the job done and going home at night. And, even like the police canteens being criticised in recent years, we need to get back to some of the basic stuff of being able to decompress after events, after incidents, and whether that be over a beer at the end of the night, or a cup of coffee or a meal, whatever. We just need to bring staff together to have these moments where we just, I remember a few weeks ago learning about the power of checking in with people. Just that daily, how you doing, Pete? That was a great bit of work you did yesterday. There's a neuroscientist in America calls these therapy doses. And the more of these therapy doses you have, you start to build it's a counterbalance to the high levels of stress that are out there just now. But lots of organisations and policing, and maybe it's the same with fire and rescue, is there's too much reliance placed on employee assistance programs, welfare programs. They're important, don't get me wrong, but if I'm a leader in these organisations and someone comes and talks about their well-being, and I quickly refer them on to this assistance program,
I've got a leaflet for you.
Yeah, what am I saying to my officer? I'm basically saying that I can't cope with this. You're somebody else's problem. That I've reached the limits of my capability. And I really think we need to go back to basics in both our professions and just build that sense of community. I said a little while ago, healthy relationships, I learned that from policing, but I also learned about the power of community to prevent. And if you take the outside police and fire, towns and villages coming together to prevent big social issues. It's the same in I was up in a rugby club last week working with a new rugby club ahead of their season, and we were just building community, just sort of looking out for each other, because, issues off the field become issues on the field. Just building that sense of connection that I think is
how do you do that then without it feeling cringy?
You just bring
or performative.
That's the big one, isn't it? You have to be consistent. I think with culture, there's a lack of consistency. We do one thing, then we move on to something else. And I think, good culture is built on high standards, good standards, but a consistency of approach. And one thing I think is needed in the likes of policing is just coming together and talking about, like you've mentioned racism, misogyny, mental health. I mean, just come together and talk about things that are important. A lot of the training I know in policing in the last few years to respond to these issues has been like the e-learning lecture, the e-learning training, which is just a tick in the box. In the work that I do with policing, and I've worked with fire and rescue before, one of the English fire and rescue services, and it's the same conversation. People in these professions want to be having conversations where they start to find their friends better, find their allies. People don't just need tools to intervene on colleagues; they need permission. And that permission has to come from the organization, but also has to come from each other. And when you create these conversations in briefing rooms and training rooms, wherever you are, you really start to build that sense of community. And I don't think policing and fire are having these conversations just now. They're lecturing their staff on what not to do. Most people in fire and policing are good people. You join to help. You join to help your communities. And what we need to do is just linking officers and our staff to helping our communities. You're not helping your community if you don't stop a colleague from making a mistake in process or behaving badly. You don't help.
You can't pour from that empty cup. Do you know what I mean? If we're not supporting each other, there's almost a strange double standard hypocrisy to perhaps treating members of the public better than we treat each other, which is really, really concerning. MSA are supporting us on today's podcast, and I chose to partner with them because I've been wearing this stuff for nearly 20 years, and they are the global leader in development, manufacture, and supply of incredible, safe products that really protect people, not just our communities out there, but also first responders, most importantly, all over the world. Get yourself over to MSA and have a look at it. The high performance protective clothing for emergency services responders. They also partner with us on the UK Pink Firefighters. That's because we love them. The helmets with the reflective visor, the F1XF, absolutely epic helmet. And not forgetting how they improve firefighter safety through their connectivity in the connected firefighter platform. MSA are always pushing the envelope, and it's a real privilege to be able to continue to grow our partnership together. So whether it's your PPE, your bunker gear, your helmets, your SCBA, your thermal imaging, your Luna, or your portable gas detection, both of us know that this equipment needs to work. It needs to be high quality, reliable, and dependable in the moment. And that's why I use MSA, because they know what's at stake. I wanted to take you back because this quote has just sat in my head since you said it. If you can't see a mentor across, was it mentor that you said?
Was it a role model? If you can't see a role model,
you can't see a role model across the table, across the dinner table. That hits. That really hits.
Hit me.
Because you are the average of the people you spend your time with. But a lot of the things that we're talking about here are really interpersonal skills. It's EQ, and it's not something, to my best understanding, other than the online packages. It's a very difficult thing to teach because it's not a course as such. It's not a qualification. It's about you and how you behave as an individual. Now, when the line is crossed into the big nasty ones, anti-Semitic, sexist, racist, whatever it might be, but that's easy to point to when it happens. The death of 1,000 cuts of lack of general care or support that people might feel on a daily basis eventually become the straw that breaks the camel's back. No snowflake blames itself for the avalanche, but it's the cumulative effect of that general lack of care or interest in each other. And I think that's a remarkably hard thing to teach, or teach is probably the wrong word, to coach on, to try and tease out of people, because you're getting right into their personal makeup here.
Yeah. Something I try and do. So I do some work outside culture work. I work a lot with young men around their role in prevention of violence and harm. And something I learned from working with baseball teams in the US many years ago was building character. Character matters. Was it that the All Blacks say better people make better All Blacks? Their performance criteria is character plus ability equals performance. Nice. and character off field, character on the field. And basically, you might be a great rugby player, but if you're a dickhead, we don't want you.
That is their thing, isn't it? No dickheads is their motto.
That was their mantra. So for me,
how do we make sure we hire for no dickheads then?
I think, that's been the big debate in the UK just now about recruiting the right people. I think we recruit good people. I really believe that we recruit people who want to join policing fire for the right reasons. We recruit people with a good set of values, the sense of right and wrong. This is wrong, this is right. I know how to behave. But what we do is we then place them in a probationary period. We then place them back in a culture where they can't be themselves. In the work that I do, I use the phrase moral rebels. And moral rebels are people who stand out. Moral rebels are people who come to work every single day and do the right thing. They don't need to go through training because they know this is wrong and I need to do something about it. And I think what happens is we put new recruits into this probationary period, which basically says, if I speak up, I could lose my job. Yeah. So they're going to keep their heads down. So I think what we do is we, very early on in policing and fire, we create clones. Mm-hmm. Right? We create clones who just follow each other. We follow the herd because speaking up is really dangerous. Speaking up is not safe to do so. And that leads to moral injury because we have good people who can't do the right thing. So that then impacts on their mental health and well-being because we know moral injury is a factor in well-being issues. But I would love organizations to help create a culture which aligns with the values and beliefs that they're the people that they're recruiting into these, and a safe culture, as a culture where it's safe to speak up, it's safe to ask questions, it's safe to be curious. And I just don't see that, unfortunately, in my own profession. And maybe you can say something about fire and rescue.
Most definitely.
We need to, like you said about emotional intelligence, we need leaders with that ability to be vulnerable. We need leaders to be able to lead through their value system. Right.
It reminds me of, and it's something you mentioned on your sort of communications with me prior to this, is that bias. Did you see her TEDx talk, by the way? Because that moral bystanders, I knew I'd heard it, or moral rebels, sorry, I knew I heard it somewhere before. There's an American psychologist, Catherine Sanderson.
Oh, wow.
I'll try and find her TEDx talk. She's got a book as well, but I can't remember what the book is.
Catherine's book is my Bible. I've known Catherine now for...
Oh, have you? Okay, she's great.
I interviewed her a couple of years ago, and we keep in touch. And turning bystanders into moral rebels, and she's taught me so much about this subject. And I just run things past it every so often. Yeah, you're on the right track, Graham. And she just presents all the science. You at the start of the session, we talked about influencing people. One thing I do in my work with police and fire is present the evidence, the science. The science says that we can train you to be more active. That's it. The science. That's what Catherine's book talks about. She learns from these moral rebels, the civil rights activists, the people who do speak up, because we can learn from their upbringing. Mm-hmm. They had role models. They had parents who spoke up. They saw their parents, community leaders, role modeling pro-social behaviours. So that follows them in their life. Mm. So that when they see injustice taking place, they do it normal. They don't conform. They stand out from the crowd because they've learned to do that. So that's what I think policing and fire and other big high-risk organisations need to, even health. Mm-hmm. Was it 2 years ago, a report in NHS England identified 11,000 people go into hospital and don't go home again. Avoidable deaths. I know, avoidable deaths, toxic cultures and hierarchies.
Yeah, that stop people, nurses, whoever, doing the right thing. Do you remember Black Box Thinking?
Yeah.
Matthew Syed's book. Yeah, we interviewed, or I had on Martin Bromley, who is featured in the beginning of the book, about his partner, Elaine Bromley, when she died as part of a normal operation because nurses didn't feel
able to
empowered to act, to speak up, to say what they thought, because they were like, oh, well, the doctor knows best. And now there's 2 doctors. Now there's 5 doctors in the room. God, I can't say anything. And
I know. What really frustrates me, Pete, is that book has been on the go for how long now? Quite a while now.
God, it's an old book. Yeah.
And I sometimes it comes up in conversation, and a police leader or a fire leader will say, "Yeah, it's a great book. I read that," and I'm desperate to tell them, well, why haven't you implemented what Matthew's telling you?
Books are really good mental masturbation. They really are.
I love that
I like them. Yeah, they really are.
Yeah.
I'm trying my utmost, even though I've just seen Catherine's book, Why We Act, Turning Bystanders into Moral Rebels. I hope it's available in audio because I'm going to go and have a look at that.
Yeah.
I try not to read too many new books if I haven't enacted great things I've learned from old books. Because sometimes, like you said about Matthew's book, we need to remember more than we need to learn sometimes. It's like, they say history doesn't repeat itself, but it definitely rhymes. This stuff has been discussed before.
Yeah, Catherine's book is
it available in audio? I'll have a look at it.
I think I'm not sure. I've got a book, and it looks like it's been through everything because it comes everywhere I go. It comes with me, and it's allowed me to build programs, activities, create conversations. So, one thing I try and do is bring her research to life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's important. There's so much research sitting on shelves that we aren't using.
Yeah.
That we could be using so much better to really reduce harm. And that's what the work that I do is about, reducing harm within cultures.
So here we go. Let me try and tie some of these threads together loosely, and I'll do it in my really bad dislodged ADHD form. But I asked you earlier, I wanted to come back to developing courage. So let's say I'm a leader. I've read all these books. I've read your book. I've read Catherine's book. I've read Black Box Thinking. Honestly, Graham, I'm on it. I've absorbed it. It's on my whiteboard at home. I've got it on my vision board and everything else. How do I bring them to life? How do I resist that peer pressure to challenge the group norms? How do I, say something even when it's unpopular or risky? How do I speak up against wrongdoing and not just be a bystander?
Well, first of all is see the benefits. So first thing first is don't react to the situation. Okay. Right? Aviation call it caging the gorilla. Right? Mm-hmm. In these stressful moments, you don't react because the brain will take over. The fight or flight kicks in. When you're stressed, you're less intelligent. I think that's the saying goes. When you're stressed, you're less.
Well, you become more primitive, don't you? You cycle back to that limbic brain or that primitive element of it.
And that top part of the brain, your values, your beliefs, your attitudes, you need that right now because that's going to drive but that's going in a fight or flight. So never react, take some deep breaths, get the brain critical. Then start to start to look inside. What do you stand for? Try and remind yourself, Pete, of your values. I remember speaking to a teacher last year in Edinburgh, and we were talking about a time when you didn't intervene, and then you intervened. And he said he was walking in Edinburgh, and he saw this female being dragged along the street by this guy, right? And his first response was, "Just walk away. What can I do?" So he walked away. 5 seconds later, he heard his recently deceased dad shout at him in his head and say, "Hey, son, I didn't teach you this." Right? And he just went back to how he was brought up, his value system, his beliefs, and he did something, right? So I remember reading a paper last year about research. I love reading research. I'm not a book, I like books, but research. And it said that if you're about to make a big decision at work, in your life, whatever, courageous decision or whatever, spend a few minutes just looking inside, right? And that's who you are. That's your value system, because that, the science says, will help you make good decisions. That sense of responsibility, internal responsibility, is a big driver. So don't react. Start to think about who you are. And it's amazing how quickly you can do this. Seconds, actually. Mm-hmm. Start to think, like, what can I do? What can I do in this situation? And then, and that's where I want to come in, is give people tools and strategies. If as a colleague or a friend who's, I don't know, saying something disrespectful, don't call them out. Don't be confrontational. Call them out and call them in. Remind.
That's a good one. Don't call them out. Call them in.
Yeah, call them in. I remember my wife Ali. She used to be a social worker in Edinburgh, and she used a phrase many years ago in front of me. It was called "connect before correct." And it's with kids with trauma.
Oh, that's good, brother.
And I had that same reaction that you just had there. I love that. And I said, Ali, tell me more about that. So if you try and correct a young person who's traumatized from childhood, stop that, cut that out. They're going to fight back, right? Mm-hmm. They're going to fight back. So the connect, she would play a game, watch a movie, and then do the correction. And you can use that. Hey Pete, listen, I'm your mate. Listen, that's not like you, but come on, what's going on? That was wrong.
Speak to their better self. Yeah. you're the type of person who does this and does that, and
Yeah.
the team look to for this, and I've known you to be there. If you speak of someone as they are, they've nothing to aspire to. But if you give them an identity of themselves that you are, I believe you to be this, but what you just did, is so.
Yeah. The best way to think about it is what would work on me if I was behaving badly. What's going to make me reflect and apologize? And I don't know about you, but I want someone to take me aside, do it quickly. Don't beat about the bush. Just tell me. Don't do it in a big group.
Okay.
Right. Just, of course, some behaviors might need that. I have to accept that. But just take me aside. Don't judge me. I'm your friend still. Just tell me. And that's more likely to lead to me apologizing to the person I've upset. Assuming that's the aim. And after all the big issues in policing and fire in the last few years, we've seen leaders rush to this call-out culture, right? And calling out, every time I ask the question, what does calling out look like? It's confrontational. It's shaming. Human beings don't react well to that. So don't.
And problem is, because we know we're struggling with it, it can be, even if justified, it can be performative and over-indexed on, and you get social reward points for it. Yeah. You get social kudos for calling out sometimes some really arbitrary things that could just require a pivot through a connect. Yeah.
And another thing to do. So we're starting to be selfish. We're starting to think about our values, our moral compass. We're starting to think about what do I do, what do I say. And I think start to think about the benefits of action, the benefits of doing something. There's research says that every time you see something harmful, you do a cost-benefit analysis subconsciously, and the costs are pretty static. In a workplace, it's isolation, it's ridicule, it's discipline, it's loss of career. And nothing I do can make that go away, right? We can't make it disappear. So start thinking of the benefits. The benefits are you stop harm. If you act early, you nip it in the bud. The benefits are you being loyal to yourself, you're being loyal to your organization, you're being a better mate. In the 1980s, there was a campaign in the US, friends don't let friends drive drunk. And it led to, I think, 70% of US citizens taking car keys off their friends.
That's great.
And I use that in my work with police and fire. Friends don't let friends lose their careers. So you're being a better colleague, you're being a better friend, and you're being loyal to your profession, you're being loyal to your communities that you serve. So I encourage police fire to tap into some of the strengths they already have.
Okay.
And I think teamwork and loyalty are core strengths in our professions. When we work together, we get it right. We're so good when a colleague needs help, we help them. But as you know, loyalty can be a strength, but it's also a weakness.
Yeah.
Loyalty. So all I do, and Catherine taught me this, was just redefine loyalty. What does it mean to be a good mate? And I try and teach.
My best friends hold me to account.
There you go.
They make me a better person. There's a couple of people I can think of, and I've said it publicly on here before. They make me a better person because I'm so close with them where like if they hear me say something on the podcast or they see me act in a certain way, if I'm hungry, angry, lonely or tired, the old Holt's principle, and they'll go, that's not what we're about. You're fucking better than that. Yeah. You know what I mean? And that's like, oh, Jesus, and that's how I'll talk to myself. But when you hear it from someone that's, I've got to be as strong as that, depending on how close you are with somebody. But the best people for me say things like that to me. Firefighters, police officers, and first responders are now stepping into environments wired with more high voltage than ever before. Everything from electric vehicles to solar panels feeding direct current through compromised structures, overhead power lines, and illicit drugs factories with improvised lethal bypasses. Any single strike in the wrong place in this type of environment can turn things fatal very quickly, and that is exactly why we've partnered with Jafco. You already know who Jafco are. They have been relied upon for decades for sturdy, get-the-job-done equipment, and they are not resting on their laurels. They are evolving to face the challenges first responders are handling today through their insulated tool range. These are purpose-built for the scenarios where contact with hidden electrical hazards isn't just possible, it is increasingly likely. Their insulated tools are engineered for real-world abuse and use, designed to keep firefighters, police officers, and all first responders alive in environments where electrification is outpacing policy, equipment, and training. And you know this. This is the kind of innovation our sector needs and the kind of investment organizations should be stepping up to support if we are serious about protecting first responders from fatal consequences. So a massive thank you to Jafco for backing the podcast and backing the crews on the ground. Go check them out, learn what they're doing, and bring that conversation into your service, because this isn't about the future, it's about right now.
But then that says a lot about you, because you're able to receive that. Right, and there's a lot of people out there who can't receive that type. They're I think they call it they're not very coachable. They're not able to listen.
Oh, gotcha.
You see that all the time. So that's why it's so important that when we're working in these big professions, we don't just train people to have these powerful conversations. We have to train them to receive them as well. Because if we get this right in an organization, there's a high probability that someone's going to tap me in the shoulder and point out my mistake. Yeah. Or something I've done that's caused upset. So I need to be ready for that. And, if you come up to me, Pete, and point out something I've done or said and you get it wrong, I need to say, listen, I really appreciate this. Thank you for doing that. But this is what happened. Because just now, the reason people don't intervene in situations is because how will Pete receive this?
Mm-hmm. So there's a couple of... I want to go into some techniques and some tactics, some deployables in some models. There's a couple I've got in my head that I try and think about, because getting the words out and starting is sometimes the hardest thing, isn't it? So let's say, I'm sat around the watch table, or I'm sat around a meeting, or wherever my structure might be, and something happens or a comment is exchanged, and internally, mentally, and I think someone said this to me ages ago, I can hear my better self screaming at me from the next room, like they're going to kick the door in, because I am not acting, and my better self is rattling the cage. How do I begin something like that? And again, this won't be a utopia. We'll put some links. People can go over and do some work with you to get a few more, but let's attempt to begin that conversation.
So there's this myth that to intervene, you need to do it there and then. You don't. Okay. You don't need to dive in, because that might not be the right time to have the conversation. Yeah. So
unless it's illegal or violent. Yeah. The obvious ones are obvious, but
yeah. If it's about to go somewhere really badly, then we're going to find a way. And something we often underuse is a little distractions.
Yeah. And interrupt.
A little change of subject. When I'm working with US police, they use code words. Code words that are agreed within the team, that if someone's getting, like I read the story of today in Scotland of a sergeant who had red mist, lost it with a prisoner, assaulted them, and their colleagues are now, they did nothing at the time. And I know, and probably know why. I'm not blaming them for that, but there's a cop who've lost their career. We need to start to give them the tools and strategies to be able to have these conversations. So little distractions, little disruptions, and then you circle back after the meeting or after the night out, or whatever that issue may be. You could intervene directly. You could say something. And if you need to have a, I'm not sure what you meant by that, but just what you could do that. You could also think to yourself, am I the best person to speak to the
individual? Yeah.
Am I the best person? I've just joined the team. Maybe I'm not the person to have this conversation, so I'll go to you.
But can that fall into slopey shoulder? Because I'm going to entrust that to somebody else who may or may not act upon it.
But that's why the whole culture needs to be engaged in this.
Okay.
That's the issue. If you do this correctly, you create a top-down, bottom-up culture where everybody is part of the solution, and people know. People know they've got a role to do this. When you instill responsibility in an individual, whether they're leader or not, the science says they're going to do something. And that's why, like the police and fire, needs to be creating these types of cultures. And here's the thing, Pete, this might not work, right? And I'm not naive to think that some of the stuff we've just talked about are going to work all the time. But there's a phrase, there's something I say to US police a lot when I work with the cops in the US, and they say to me, "Oh, this won't work, Graham." I says, "Well, see that bulletproof vest that you wear every single day? Will that stop every single bullet?" "No, it won't." "Well, why wear it then?" It's just another tool in your toolkit. That's all it is.
Yeah.
Just now, a code of ethics.
It's going to stop some of the bullets, but not all of them. Yeah.
A code of ethics is not a toolkit. A code of ethics is you need to report, and that's the frustration that I have. Is that if you're placing a reliance on a code of conduct, code of ethics, and your culture isn't safe and supportive, then it's not a great way to to build trust and confidence within the organization and also with your customers and clients outside the organization. So culture is something which I don't think we've put the effort in. We've not put in the hard yards because it's hard. It really is hard. But actually, the effort in, most people in fire want to be part of a good culture.
Oh, yeah.
Most of us do.
We know we have to come to work, and we want to come to work with people that want to come to work and engage with us in a nice way on a daily basis. Ideally, even have some fun if we can, and a bit of a laugh. And I want you to care about my daughter and tell you about the thing I did at the weekend. I'd love to be able to share those things with you, not be fearful of it.
Yeah. And as I say to you, the work that I do, peer intervention, active bystandership, it's just another way of building that culture. And I really think that we hear people say that the biggest asset we have is our people. Well, let's activate them. Let's give them responsibility to intervene, because it's that idea. If we create that culture, it's that idea. If I'm not looking out for you, who's looking out for me? I could make a mistake one day. That could be a career ending. I want you to come and tell me. I want you to tell me quickly. Don't wait till it's gone beyond the line and things have moved on. Just tell me. And that's something which, some of the evidence that we're seeing from work in the US just now in this approach is that it's having a lot of success. Police officers and staff are feeling more empowered. They've got a better understanding of what peer intervention is all about, and they see it as a plus, as a benefit for their culture, because they're just creating that community that I think policing, whether you are in the UK or in the US, has lost. It lost a lot of its way, I think, in the last few years. I
want to circle back to that, but an interesting thing that I was reading during our notes, and I'd love to throw this on the table to see what it brings up in our conversation. You referenced in our exchanges the Casey report and the murder of Sarah Everard, and it's not something I'm particularly familiar with. I had a little bit of a look this morning, but for the benefit of all of us, could you unfold a little bit around what happened there?
Well, we had the horrific incident, was it 2021? Sarah Everard was, I think, kidnapped off the street. And in the days after, we learned it was a serving Metropolitan Police officer that had committed that horrible, horrible incident. And since then, policing has rightly been under the spotlight. And we had in the weeks after that, we had Mark Rowley on the steps of Scotland Yard talking about how in the next few months, few years, the public in the UK are going to see some horrific cases of police officers being charged and convicted, hopefully, of sexual violence, domestic abuse. And it really got me thinking that policing is just playing whack-a-mole, right? And what the Casey report was telling us was that systems of sexism, misogyny, racism, and you can bring that into as well. We need to stop waiting for big things to happen. We need to start creating cultures where we prevent these things happening in the first place. And there was lots of evidence presented with the Casey report. Another thing, the Angelini report highlighted, precursor behaviour to the murder and kidnap of Sarah Everard. And I know Angelini, which was in the back of the Casey report, she talked about, I think, indecent exposure is the gateway offence to the murder for Wayne Couzens, that officer who was convicted of the murder. And I wanted to say, well, this started way before. Way before. We've got, I don't know what it's like in fire and rescue. I suspect it's very similar. We have some men who just make women uncomfortable.
Yeah, there's some lurchers out there.
Right. And we need to stop and we need to start thinking about, why is that? What are they doing? Because that's the time where we want people to intervene and act, not when your colleague's been convicted of sexual violence or murder or whatever. It's we want people to be intervening in that. I'm not want to suck the fun out of policing or fire, but there's certain behaviours, certain attitudes that are just not acceptable, surely. But we often let these things happen. At the start of the session today, I talked about violence moving. Irvin Stout, another psychologist that I admire, talks about the evolution of harm. Harm will evolve and continue to be interrupted. And without interruption, it will keep going. It will keep moving. It'll become embedded in a team, a watch, wherever. It will just become normalized. And we need to think about what can we be doing on a daily basis to stop that, to create cultures of respect, kindness, and cultures where we just nip things in the bud, where we just set a tone for for our team, for our watch. And, that's the role of a leader, but it's also the role of all of us, I think, as men in particular. The focus with the Casey report was looking at sexism and misogyny. This isn't just on leaders. This is on every man listening to this. We have a role to speak to our mates, and they're behaving inappropriately. I helped Police Scotland build a campaign a few years ago called Don't Be That Guy. And it was that idea where we trained young men in Scotland to have that important conversation with their mates. If your mate's about to say something, do something, just have a word with them. Call them in. Don't let them just get on with it. Because we talk about culture being defined by the worst behaviours we're willing to accept. It's the same for fire culture, police culture, but male culture as well. We need, I think, these last few years since the murder of Sarah Everard, we need to be focusing, in my view, a lot on the culture, the situation that emboldens the harm doers, the people who are causing the harm.
Would it be fair to say that's an example of a very small minority? And I think it was someone Moran. I forget the lady's name. She wrote a book called What About Men? I think she wrote about boys, it might have been. I can't remember the lady's name, I apologise. But it was about how difficult it is for young men in society these days, because we feel like we need to apologise for all the wrongdoings of the past, for the gender pay gap, for the misogynistic way in which policy and organisational structures have been developed historically. And that probably leads me into the higher levels of suicide that we see among men, because people talk about, most men commit, the horrible effects, and, most men are at the top of organizations. And I'm like, but more men also go to prison. More men also commit suicide. There's more bin men than there is bin ladies. So I'm trying to just play a little bit of devil's advocate, because we are seeing a rise in male suicide, certainly even within the emergency services and within the niche of the fire and rescue service. There's far too many. There was a suicide only a few weeks ago in Scotland, fire and rescue service.
That's right.
And I think past a certain point, we can't continue, not that we're ignoring it, but I don't think we're doing much specifically to support men within their mental health. And that is a large factor of our society.
You've raised a really valid point. And when I talk about what I've just talked about there, about men speaking up, I'm not having a go at men, right? Violence, let's have some facts here. So most violence in this world is committed against men by other men, right? That's fact. We know that. When we talk about rape and sexual assault, some men are committing violence against, in the majority, women and girls, but other men as well. Okay.
Rape was an annoying one. I think it's in her book as well. She was like 100% of rape. Well, sorry, she used it as an example. She said, I heard the fact of 100% of rapes are committed by men.
Because the
now, if you you look at the way the definition is written, it's penal penetration.
That's right.
Ergo, a woman could not commit rape.
But women can commit sexual assault.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people get hung up on that, and I can understand why. I totally get it. But sexual assault and rape, if you go to court in Scotland, the High Court in Scotland, either crime will have life imprisonment. But I think we in society, same in England and Wales, if you
life imprisonment. I'm not saying it's not justified. It's justified. I was just
like that. So it's treated in the courts exactly in the same way. But I think we in society, we put rape up here and sexual assault down here.
Right. Yeah, we do, because rape, when you hear the stories of it, or if you know anybody, you go, this is a horrific thing which will damage that person for the rest of their life.
And you mentioned, suicide, and I talk openly about this. I lost my dad to suicide in 2008, so I know how it feels, right? I know how it feels, and I think so. The connection between all these issues, and also why a lot of men are silent. It's very gendered. I'm doing an input in a few weeks' time on how gender is an inhibitor in likes of policing and fire. It stops men speaking up, right? These hierarchies, formal ones, but informal hierarchies exist. So
Quick pause, because I want to tell you about a new partnership we have with First Tactical. First Tactical builds equipment for people who work when environments are seriously unforgiving. And if you go to their website, you'll find kit is designed specifically for us, for firefighters, for police officers, technical rescue teams, fire investigation, hazmat, hazardous materials teams, urban search and rescue. This is honestly the equipment that you really want to rely on. It's built for real operations, real pressure, long ass days, and I genuinely use this stuff. Here's a few of my favorites. They've got their men's Defender short sleeve. I've got that in black. It's got a huge load of specialized pockets, space for all of our gears, the pads, the pens, all of the stuff. It's got them on the sleeves on both sides. Also got the Defender pants. These have got 28 pockets in total on them. It's mad. Let's be honest, we absolutely love the bags. I use their 25-litre specialist half-day backpack. The shoulder straps as well are strong AF. Like I say, this isn't lifestyle gear. It's built for real world, real operations. We talk about the realities of the job, and First Tactical is just the ideal partnership for us. So go take a look, firsttactical.co.uk. Now back to the show.
As someone who spent his last years in policing looking at violence, we need to be talking about male violence against men, against women, against themselves. Suicide is self-directed violence. That's the World Health Organization defines it. And
self-directed violence. That's a really...
Yeah, I know, but that's how it's defined. And the question...
Is it still classed as a crime as well?
Not now. No, I don't think so. No, it's not.
I think if you do it, I don't know about police, but I know in the military, if you kill yourself, you don't get...
Is that right? Oh, well.
Yeah, you don't get, your family don't get the payout and you like that. Because you've committed suicide. Yeah. Whereas now we say you've completed the act of suicide, don't we? So it's like a weird dichotomy in your brain. We say you've successfully completed suicide. Because it used to be, if you committed it, it was a crime.
Yeah, that's right. And so for me, it goes back to what we talked about at the start. We need to be asking why questions and what questions. So why is most violence in this world committed by men against men? What's going on in the way we're bringing our boys up, socializing our boys? It's not about having a go at boys with men. It's about understanding why. Why is this happening? Why is this going on? Why are men more likely to die by suicide than women and girls? Why is that? And it's, and for me and also why do men struggle to speak to their mates about their behaviour? Because it's something that Catherine talks about in her books. She talks about how, she talks about her own experience of her son. I think first year at university, she gets a call from her son one day. It's in the book, and one of my friends has died. Oh, what's happened? Oh, we were having lots of drinking and he collapsed. We thought he was okay. We put him in a recovery position and he died. So nobody in that group was prepared to phone the ambulance, prepared to do something about it. So and she talks about how young men often struggle to speak up, to stand out from the crowd. So again, it goes back to the way we socialize. And people often think, well, what about male, female perpetrators? That's wrong. Totally get you. But most violence, I keep saying, in my thing, most violence is committed by men against men, and for us to really get to grips with lots of these issues outside workplaces, but also inside workplaces. A few years ago, Harvard did some research on fire and rescue, military, policing, and they identified what they call masculinity contest cultures.
Oh, God, yeah.
I know. So, and we've all been part of that. We play up to the norms, what's expected of us. And they said...
I hate it.
We hate it,
and that's not me being like values, but like...
I
don't like wearing my uniform into meetings because people like to point at their ranks and it's like a big ego massage and it's a gotcha and it's shut up.
But how these behaviours play out, they pick, like, as a young detective, I was working 20 hours a day to prove myself at the expense of seeing my kids, right? So this is one example. Another example of the culture is bad behaviour. Sexism, misogyny, all these things we've been seeing in fire and policing in these last few years. And what Harvard says is that what organizations need to do is to go back to basics. What is your why? So what do you stand for as an organization? Your mission, your vision, whatever. You need to correct misperceptions. And that's the conversations. You just highlighted that you hated these games that you played as a guy. I hated them. Well, I didn't want to play them, but I felt I had to. I felt that my mates wanted to play them as well. So what Harvard says is just bring people together and break down these misperceptions. And Catherine talks about that in her book, correcting misperceptions. And create cultures where the likes of Wayne Couzens and others would have been kept in check from day one. They just know that their behaviour and attitude is not accepted here.
Yeah.
And it's okay. They call it keep harm doers in check. Create a culture where you just know that your behaviour is not tolerated. It's going to be called out because you've crossed the line. So again, this isn't just me talking about being all moralistic. The evidence tells us there's issues in fire and rescue and policing that we need specific program or focus on to deal with them.
I want to go 2 places next. One, if you'll permit and if you're happy to explore it for a second, I wanted to ask you around the pathway to suicide, if you could venture to reflect on your experience with your dad. If you're happy to share, if not, we can completely skip over it out of respect. And then after that, I'd love to ask you about some of the work you trialed with West Yorkshire Police, with Humberside Fire and Rescue, and how that was positively experienced as some sort of trainer modelling. But I'd love to ask you just for a little bit of a segue into early intervention with regard to people's mental health. If you could, we're all experts in retrospect, and I'm sure.
I know. Well, before that, so this month is probably what's going to be the 12th anniversary? No, 17th anniversary of my dad's suicide. He went missing one Saturday. In the lead up to that, he was about to retire. He'd had a stroke a year before, very minor stroke, got over the physical sides of things. But I think the retirement, he started to worry. He didn't need to worry. My dad had money in the bank. He was a hoarder, my dad. And he had enough money, he had a pension, but I got the impression about 2 weeks before we started to see the real demise, worrying about what was coming. And I tried to reassure him, everything will be okay, Dad. Let's get to the doctors and all these things. So back then I had no clue what to do, right? I had no idea how to deal with that.
I think that's most of us though.
Yeah, totally. And so one Saturday, phone call from his partner, is your dad with you? No, he's not. He said he went out to work, he's not come home, and immediately red flags for me. Call the police, get him in. Is a code red mispair, whatever you called them back in the day. And he was, and he's been a big reason my wife for working with policing, because my dad was found 10 feet from his front door 4 months after he went missing. The police missed.
Whoa!
I know. Mistakes in search. It's a garden with lots of bushes, trees, and mistakes happen. Mistakes happen in fire, and human beings fuck up from time to time. But these fuck ups are seen by colleagues who don't intervene. So that's really pushed me to do this work. So
10 feet from his front door.
Yeah, literally 10, 15 feet from his front door. He got into some bushes, and looking back, my dad just thought this is the only way out for me. Right. And that was, that was my dad's mindset. So since then, what I've learned, my learning curve has gone through the roof for all obvious reasons. Just if you see any, the first step to being an active bystander is to notice.
Yeah. And we all do that.
It's just to notice something. Second stage is take responsibility. Even if you shout in your head, I'm dealing with this, I'm owning this, that's you taking responsibility. And then it's about having these chats, right? Back then I didn't realize that suicide ideation can be interrupted just like that. Right, and I remember.
Well, they say the mind whispers before it screams.
Honestly, and I remember getting to know a guy called Johnny Benjamin years ago, and Johnny he made a documentary about the stranger on the bridge, and Johnny was a guy, mental health issues all his life, and I think he still has that. He's still quite open and talks about it openly. And he went to Waterloo Bridge in London to jump off the bridge. That was what he was going to do that day, and he's on the edge of the bridge, and there's crowds walking past him, no one's saying anything. Then all of a sudden, he hears this voice, "It won't always be like this, mate." And in that instant, he changed. He went away from wanting to die to not wanting to die. So, and I'm not sorry, and yeah, there was that. And I also learned that people who are thinking of suicide, they don't want to die. But that's
no. Yeah.
You see it. So for me, it's about giving them an alternative, and that's what the guy on the bridge did. He gave to have think differently. I remember reading watching a podcast of a guy who jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge and survived, And within 2 seconds of jumping, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this.
Immediate regret, yeah.
Immediate regret. So that's there. And also, the most obvious thing that I learned was that speaking about suicide to people who are thinking of suicide, you can't make a bad situation any worse.
Yeah. One of the things I've had when I've experienced people speaking about even that ideation is, have you made a plan? How are you going to do it?
Yeah.
And they've already rationalized it. So it's not, you're not going to encourage them.
Oh, yeah.
But if you start, at the worst case of the scenario, if they have made a plan and you can find out what the plan is, you can try and steer them away from a situation or an environment where they could successfully complete that plan. But there's nothing wrong with discussing it. But we are petrified
and
of making it worse.
Yeah. And there's one thing that anybody listening to this, male, female, whoever, one thing you can do on a daily basis is talk about this stuff, right? Talk about your own vulnerabilities. One thing I learned about this work is, just talk about how you're feeling. Talk about your vulnerabilities. I remember just before I retired from policing, I had my mental health wobble, worrying about retirement. And I went to a dark place. I didn't think about suicide, but I was thinking, is this going to work for me? And thankfully, my wife that picked up on that and very quickly, got the support I needed but I didn't get help from work.
No.
Because I didn't get it.
I was very lucky. Accidental luck, let's say, through Narcotics Anonymous and recovery process. I tend to lean on stuff outside of work. Yeah. Because either you're a bit scared to admit something to work in case they take, especially for police officers. I know if you're going through I don't know if it's still the case. If you're going through a divorce, they'll take your arms license off you. If you express, it can go against you. Very quickly, and that can make people fearful of sharing things with their organizations. Yeah. And also, but then look at aviation. Aviation now, they encourage co-pilots, captains to, if you've got a colleague who's been off work with, my wife's cousin died a few years ago, very young. Her son was a pilot with a UK airline, European airline actually. And he was off for 6 months. He went back to work, and mates just checking in. How you doing? Because it's in their interest to check in with a colleague who's been off sick for 6 months. Stress and mental health took over as the biggest lost time incident, past musculoskeletal injuries, past bad backs. Bad backs went out of fashion 10 years ago. Yeah. It's mental health now. And in the US, more cops die by suicide than they die in the line of duty. It's a massive issue. They're really leaning into. It's really sad. So one thing I've learned, just talk about things you're passionate about. So I talk about my experience with well-being, and it because, I don't like the campaigns that say men need to talk more. No, I need to create the conditions for people to talk. Yeah. That's something. So, being an active bystander is about just acting way before something happens. It's the daily interactions. It's checking in. It's realizing how busy you are and how that might mean you miss things. So just know how busy you are, but still invest in the conversations with your colleagues. Just checking in. How you doing? Notice the little things and learn to, aviation. I've got a really good tool that I learned, and we use it in policing in the US. It's called the PACT model, PACT. It's an escalation approach to intervention. Probe. Okay. First is P, probe. Hey, you okay, Pete? So I say, I'm a bit struggling today, brother, to be honest. Yeah, so then we can start to continue the conversation. But maybe you say, I'm fine, I'm okay. Yeah. And you still show signs of distress. I'm going to escalate. There's a behaviour that's out of the ordinary. Yeah. So I'm going to escalate to alert. Hey, are you okay, Pete? I've noticed. And I'm going to tell you what I've seen. I'm really concerned about you. C is the challenge where, Pete, listen, we've talked before, nothing's changing. I'm really concerned about you, mate. Come on, is everything okay? And the last one, T, take action. I'm bypassing you, Pete. I'm going to get help from somebody else. So it's that. I think in the science, it's called the perils of ambiguity, where you just don't know what's happening. And rather than dive in, just probe. Hey, you okay? Mm-hmm. I train door staff sometimes in clubs to ask questions like, hey, how's your night going? Yeah. They come across ambiguous situations. And that PACT model is it's a great tool for hierarchies, dealing with a boss. So it's a great tool for dealing with ambiguity. So for me, my experience. So that's probe, alert, challenge, take action. It's a nice little tool to overcome issues. And I suppose that then going on to your second question about my work with policing and fire,
You know,
Yeah, Humberside, 2024. What was this?
So I, 2020, 21, I got invited to be part of a team in the US training police officers. It was the time of the Casey report and all the issues in policing. I'd been pulling together a whole load of resources for policing in the UK, but there was a lot of pushback. There still is pushback. I have to be honest with you. There's still a lot of pushback. They don't like being told what to do. Fire was fire as well. So I pulled this all stuff together and I went to a colleague in West Yorkshire saying, listen, I'd love to try this out with you. Pilot this, you'll be the trailblazers. And along with a colleague who I brought in to help out, we trained about 1,000 police officers, including about 250 leaders from the chief down, senior leaders. And the evaluation was fantastic. We got properly evaluated through a friend in university who did some academic rigor around it. And the As One program is basically a program that seeks to reduce harm from bad behaviour, mistakes, and poor well-being. And we often separate these issues, don't we? We often look at bad behaviour as we'll deal with it that way.
Isolation,
With mistakes happen in we're high-risk professions, and well-being. We separate that as well. They're all connected. Poor well-being is a factor in mistakes. Poor well-being is a factor in bad behaviour. So that allowed me to go into these four. So we talk about that. We use the science of bystandership, which is really bringing in some of the social science experiments that explain why people don't intervene in situations. The first step to intervening is to understand why you don't intervene. Right? So we talk about that. I bring in some of the strengths in our professions, teamwork and loyalty. And let's just redefine what it means to be a good mate. And friends don't let friends lose their careers. Friends don't let friends struggle with their well-being. So starting to motivate. So understand what stops acting, but then tap into motivators. The biggest motivator, as we talked about earlier, is your morals, your moral compass. Bring it to work with you. Don't leave it at home. Bring it to work with you. And then the last part of the day is practice. Let's practice this stuff. I think Philip Zimbardo, the psychologist, calls it the heroic imagination, where you imagine the conversation that you talked a little while ago that you're going to have with your boss at the office, or you're going to have with a colleague who is struggling with their well-being. Let's practice it. And let's come together. And when you bring all these, what the best feedback I got was from officers who said, you know what, Graham, you've made me better understand what my colleagues think and feel on this stuff. And you know what? They think the same as me. So what that is, I think in psychology, it's called pluralistic ignorance, where you wrongly perceive what your friends think. And what as one allows...
There's a version of you existing in everyone else's mind, isn't there?
Well, that's right. And as one allows to bring people together, as one, the All Blacks call it the VANU family, the team flow. The team that flows together will be the most successful team organisation. So I wanted to create that in this programme. And since then I've worked with 4 or 5 other UK police forces. I've trained the trainer model, and working with Humberside Fire and Rescue with the Trailblazers there, I think they're still slowly embedding it within the culture. So the program's there, and it's a program that, I've got interest in social work. They're a high risk profession. I've got some connections being made with medicine. It actually scares me that we don't look at human factors in our healthcare just now. As someone who's in their mid to late 50s, I keep good health, but who knows in the future? I want to know that nurse is going to be able to say to the consultant, Graham's struggling or whatever, right?
Yeah.
We don't want that.
Yeah. No, 1,000%.
So As One is just a program that it aims to build team, to get back to basics. The Harvard talked about getting back to basics, going back to why you joined Fire and Rescue, why did you join policing to help people, just help each other in there.
I think that it's so powerful, mate. I would love for everyone to just pick up several of these nuggets, and even if they don't feel remarkably confident with it, just fumble their way into beginning those conversations.
Yeah.
Because some of the stuff that you've discussed today, I think, just act as wonderful, like jump-off points, wonderful platforms to give people permission to begin to discuss some of these elements that we've gone through today. I want to be respectful of time. People don't know we're actually recording on a bank holiday today. But what is some of the final thoughts that we want to leave in the mind of the listener? We're going to put some links underneath our conversation today. So if people want to go and find out a little bit more information, it's grahamgoulden.com. There's some wonderful blogs on there that you can pick up, use, adapt for your own work. There's some stuff on the YouTube page I think would be really beneficial for people. We're going to drop these links underneath. But if I pushed you into a corner and forced you to try and wrap up our conversation from today, what would you want to leave in the mind of the listener?
Yeah, I always say to people, we all have the power to make a difference. Action breeds action, as the science says. And one person you can become that trusted ally. If you want to disclose something, someone discloses to you. One person can build that sense of momentum in a team. One person gives permission. If you act, you give permission, and silence that we see in fire and rescue and policing, it's not inevitable. So to leaders, police leaders, fire leaders listening to this today, put the effort in. Look after your culture, because it's worth so much to you, right? It's worth so much to you. And culture is more than the PowerPoint slide. It's more than the code of ethics. It's the daily stuff that you do. And let's face it, leaders create leaders. And most people want to do this. That's what my work tells me. Lots of things there.
Dude, I think that was really powerful. Thank you for your time today. Really thank you to family as well for giving you up for an hour and a half as we sprint into tea time. But some more love to everybody, and look forward to catching up with you soon.
Take care, Pete. Nice to meet you.
Well, that's it for today, folks. Hope you took a lot away from that episode. We started the Firefighters podcast to develop, inspire, connect, motivate, represent, and most importantly, celebrate the world of incredible emergency services operators and the wider sector through this series of wide-ranging conversations. We really love creating this podcast and bringing it to so many people. Did you know you can also find these on YouTube? We do a lot of video podcasts now. You can head over to our YouTube page and follow, subscribe there. And as a final ask from us, whatever platform you're on, please rate the podcast. It really helps us as a key performance indicator to reach more and more people. I've been your host, Pete Wakefield. This has been the Firefighters Podcast. And wherever you are in the world, please stay safe, be happy, and where possible, please remember and support your firefighters and first responders. I'll see you next time.